The subject, the actual subject of these 2 days' events is the subject of history as tragedy. Because we are living in a real tragedy. When a person says to me, why don't you give answers in bite-sized doses like the other politicians? Why don't you take a poll and find out what the people want to hear and state your proposition in terms of the prejudices which they already have, as the polls tell you? My answer would be, I'm not a fool. Because what is dooming us is not Richard Nixon. What is dooming us is not George Bush, much as he tries. What is dooming us is our people. What our people believe. Because these people we like to blame, we talk about the crooked politicians, we talk about the conspirators on Wall Street, we talk about this, we talk about that, always blaming someone else. And if they're a public figure, as in the old days when some people wore top hats, it was more fun to throw a snowball at a top hat. So we always blame somebody else. Now, the job of a leader is not to blame leaders. We can point out some are bad, some are defective, some are utterly immoral, some are barely human. But the problem lies in the people, not in the leaders. The problem often of oppression lies in the oppressed, because they will not accept any proposition that is not consistent with the assumption that they must remain the oppressed. Now, we wish to make that clear this weekend. We now have a civilization, a worldwide civilization, which is doomed in its present form. Over the next months or years, this civilization which people talk about, their opinions, their culture, their prejudices, their way of life, their traditions, are all gone. Nothing can save it. And it's like clinging to a stateroom on the Titanic. If you cling to those traditions, you go down and drown with it. We have to get the people off the Titanic, off traditions, into the lifeboats so they may be saved. In order to do that, we have to attack what people believe is the most precious private opinion. Like the fellow who tells you, the poor ignorant fellow who says, I know all about things, I read the newspapers and watch television. Which means he knows nothing. Because he has confidence in these things as sources of so-called information. And this is the thing we must make clear. And in these sessions today and tomorrow, we will endeavor to help make that clearer. This is not the first time we've addressed this subject, nor will this be an ordinary presentation where we talk about something, present a few facts, and then try to induce you to reach a conclusion. No, this will be in the spirit of a Shakespeare or Schiller tragedy. And a Shakespeare or Schiller tragedy, as you may know, those of you who are old enough to know there once was a Schiller or Shakespeare, which means you're probably over 50, the way schools have been going these days. Know that what the end of every tragedy is a bloody, horrible show on stage. The blood isn't actually there, unlike the modern movies and television. But the death is there, the representation of death and calamity is there. The representation of the collapse of entire civilizations and nations is there. Now, what's the function of a tragedy? Since the time of the form of Sophocles or Aeschylus in ancient Greece, who invented this form, or the more modern type of Marlowe, Dr. Faustus, or the Jew of Malta, or Shakespeare's tragedies, or those of Schiller. What is the function of tragedy? It is not entertainment in the modern sense. The function of tragedy is to slaughter the characters on stage that the people in the audience may be saved. The joy of tragedy is to recognize that the person on stage, what is Hamlet or someone else, the leading character, and the people, the whole people with whom this leading character is associated, are doomed. And they are doomed by their traditions. They're not doomed by violating a law. They're not doomed by violating a tradition. They're not doomed by going against the opinion of the common people. That is not what dooms them in any case. What dooms them is they cling to accepted traditions. Because the accepted tradition, like the iceberg that greeted the Titanic and ripped the bottom out of it, is what's going to kill them.